Let's go, girls. Welcome to Talk Wealthy to Me. I'm Michelle Taylor, founder of Women in Wealth. From breaking money myths to building wealth and achieving financial freedom, we're here to empower you to create your own path. Talk Wealthy. Now, join the conversation and let's change the way women think and feel about money. Okay, ready? Today's guest is Catherine Morgan, an award-winning financial advisor, certified financial coach, and founder of the Money Panel. She's also a financial abuse specialist and the creator of the Money Narrative Clearing Method. Catherine's mission is bold and beautiful: to help 1 million people around the world feel safe with money and reclaim their financial power. She's the author of the #1 best-selling book, It's Not About the Money, host of a top 5% global podcast by the same name, and a leading voice in financial healing and empowerment. You guys are going to love this conversation. I cannot tell you how excited I am today to be joined by Catherine Morgan. She is somebody doing a lot of the good work that is necessary in this space, things that we talk about, and I think you are going to learn so much. So with that, Catherine, welcome to Talk Wealthy to Me.
Thank you so much. I am absolutely delighted to be here, and I know that you came on our podcast a few weeks ago as well, so I'm just loving the fact that we can get together again and dive into the subject of money and wealth and all the juicy things.
Yes, and it was so serendipitous because I know when we were talking on your podcast, so many of the things that you were saying, I was relating to and vice versa. And it just made me feel so good that there are women like you and like myself that are out there doing this important work. So tell everybody what you do and the name of your company.
Yeah, so I'm a wealth mentor. I operate under my personal brand, Catherine Morgan, and we have a training business called the Money Panel. And we basically help women to have a better and safer relationship with money. One of the things that I'm so passionate about is about putting the tools that historically have only been in the hands of financial professionals into the hands of everybody. And having been a financial advisor myself for nearly 20 years, I had a terrible relationship with money. You know, I knew all the practical ways to budget, managing my money, investing money, all of those things, but I wasn't doing any of it for myself. And I really believe that there is another conversation to be having when we talk about women and wealth. It's not just the practical side of money, it's also the deep emotional relationship that we have and we carry alongside money.
It is so timely and critical, this conversation, because you're right. Number one, I don't mean to take anything away from anybody out there having these important conversations, but I think that one of the things that is so exciting to me about you and the work you're doing is you are a licensed professional. You have been a financial advisor. There's a lot of noise out there from people that don't really understand it and are giving good advice. But at the end of the day, I think that the necessity of having those licenses and experience is so important. It's the difference maker. So you are also spot on. So many people, whether it's people like us or people that are in nutrition or people that are pastors, whatever they do in their life, it's so often the case that they are saying, do as I say, not as I do. And I think that the work you're doing to encourage other people, money coaches, financial advisors, to dig a little bit deeper and understand their own relationship with money is something that a lot of people have overlooked for a long time. So thank you so much for doing that for the betterment of all of us.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I think that money is the deepest relationship that we have in life, because really the relationship that we have with money is a mirror reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves, right? And there's such
So
a
true.
connection between our identity, how we feel about ourselves, and how much power we give away to money, which is just such an interesting concept within itself. So I'm really happy to be here talking about this with you today.
So how did you get into this line of work, this industry? Was it something that you were always drawn to from a young age?
I don't think anyone chooses
I know.
ever really to go into financial services. It was, I mean, my path was, I have an older sister. She's 7 years older than me, and she worked in a bank. And so when I went through college, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. I'll just go follow what my sister's done. And I literally got a job. I started off as a cashier in the bank, and then I worked my way through the various roles of mortgage advisor and account opener and then investment advisor and all the different roles over like a 15, 20-year career. So I never really chose financial services. And it's quite hilarious, really, because I'm not good with numbers. I'm terrible at maths. So it didn't make logical sense for me to be in that profession. But there were aspects of it that I really enjoyed. And there were aspects when I look back on it now where I think it taught me so much about money and so much that I can now use to help other people and to help to create more gender disparity, like more equality when it comes to wealth. And I feel like that was part of my overall journey, that I was always meant to work with money, but I never really understood why until I went through my own personal transformation with my own relationship with money.
I love that so much because you are 100% right. I also would have never found myself on this path, stumbled into it, and also considered myself terrible with numbers. And even talking to some young women, my nieces in my life that'll say, I would love to do what you do, but I'm terrible at math. And it's like, you don't have to be good at math. It's such a bigger conversation. So okay, so here you are. You've worked your way up in the banking world. How did you make the transition to now being a money coach and all that entails with what you do?
Yeah, it was a real journey. But for me, it began, it was in the winter actually of just before I got married. So I moved over to Jersey, the Channel Islands, which is a tiny, weeny little island just on the off, like about like 10 miles away from the north coast of France. So a little cluster of islands over here called the Channel Islands. And I was about to get married. I was 29 years old and I was walking to work. And I stopped in the coffee shop, as I did every morning, to get my cup of tea. And as I walked into the coffee shop, went to pay for my tea, and there was a leaflet on the side that talked about personal styling. And so I picked up this leaflet and I was like, oh, I would love to have someone come sort out my wardrobe. I have so many clothes, I don't wear half of them. And I knew deep down that I had a really big emotional relationship with my body and money. So for me, when I would receive money, when I got paid, I would mentally spend it before I even got it. And I would go shopping on my lunch break and I would just spend in this real attempt to create a short-term dopamine hit that would make my nervous system feel safe to go, you're okay, you're enough.
Wow.
And I remember when I picked up this leaflet, I went home that evening and I said to my husband, oh, please, can I have this for my birthday? And so he bought me a day with a personal stylist and it literally changed my life. She weeded out all my wardrobes. She left me sitting on my little red couch in this little cottage in Jersey. It was on a winter's night in December, and she closed the door behind her and left me surrounded by like 20 bin bags worth of clothes. And I remember just crying and crying and crying. And it felt like she'd given me permission to get rid of all of the stuff that I'd been hoarding and holding on to in an attempt to make me feel better about myself. When really what I was doing is just looking at what everybody else is wearing and going, oh, that looks really nice. Maybe I'll feel better about my body if I wear that outfit. And of course, that never worked.
No.
And from that moment, I actually flew a lady over to Jersey who trained this lady in personal styling. And I asked her to train me to be a personal stylist.
Wow.
And I then very shortly after that fell pregnant with my first son and got married. And when I was on maternity leave, I was running this like little side hustle business as a personal stylist. So I was inviting these women around. My husband would take the baby out and I would dress them for their body shape, look at their colors, the whole shebang, right? And they would leave my little flat feeling how I felt when that lady left me in that cottage. And it was the first experience for me, first of all, of understanding that my relationship with money was deeply intertwined with body shame and shame. Like, I'm not good enough with money. How can I be a financial advisor and live in £30,000 worth of debt because I'm using it as a way to make me feel better about myself? And I think for me, that was the first initial transformation where I then just started to get so obsessive about like, what's money psychology? And what is this link between money and emotions? And I literally, over the next 10 years, just committed all of my work to really understanding what this connection was. And that then created this next phase for me of then talking about it very openly. I was very open with my friends about it. I started a Facebook group. We started hanging out every Sunday night in this Facebook group and talking about money.
Which is important,
and eventually,
by the way. I mean, having the conversations that just aren't usually had.
100%. And I think as well, because I was a financial advisor, it was like, oh, so even though you knew all the practical things, she's still not getting it right. So it was almost like this permission slip to other women to go, okay, well, if she's got money shame, maybe there's something that I need to be understanding about my money shame that's going to help me in my relationship with money.
And so you saw obvious success with your friends and then realized that maybe there was a bigger calling here, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, what led from that moment was I went back to work after maternity leave and I really didn't have a good experience. I had a male boss, very chauvinistic. I was the only woman in my team, very typical in the financial services space. I'm sure you will probably agree with me. And I just didn't feel fulfilled. I was feeling very jaded with the focus being on selling financial products. Nowadays, it's slightly different because financial advisors operate differently now. But in those days, it was very transactional. Still is in some pockets of financial advice, but in the main, things have evolved now. But it just didn't feel good for me when I had a woman coming into my office who was 70 years old, who just lost her husband, who was absolutely engulfed in grief and loss and had never managed money before. And my manager's ringing me at the end of the day saying, how many products did you sell her?
I know.
And I'm like, this is not what it's about. And I literally resigned. I handed my notice in. I decided to make my Facebook Lives in this Facebook group a regular thing. I started blogging. I started creating one-to-one coaching offers. And I very quickly then replaced my corporate income with my self-employed income. And that's where it began. Like, that was my next evolution of, do you know what? There's more to this than financial products. There's more to this in helping to support people in navigating those big financial transitions in their life, like loss of a loved one, divorce, financial abuse, all of the things that sit around the life changes that we as women experience that do need to be handled very differently to just getting a 401k, I think you guys call it over there, or an investment account. It was so much deeper than that.
It's so true. And you're right. Even in this country, we are definitely in the minority in this space. And it's funny, isn't it, how men plan very differently. So it's a system that is built for and by men. And, men are, I think, more open to a transactional conversation. They are more driven by what is this product going to do for me? They are more accepting of risk, especially if they have a friend or someone that they respect, tell them it's worth it. They ask very little questions and they just dive in. Where women are much more thoughtful about the risk of something. They are less driven by a rate of return than they are knowing that at the end of the day, they are never going to run out of money and they are going to be able to do the important things that they want to do. If they can accomplish that, it doesn't matter what the rate of return needs to be. They just want the end result. And especially with what you just referenced with changes of life, women are less likely to get remarried. Women are more often than not the ones that are in the passenger seat when it comes to the financial planning. The relationship is typically with the husband and the advisor. I don't want to get this wrong, but it's something like 87% of women die alone and will handle finances on their own at some point because we outlive the men in our lives. And we're still fighting tooth and nail in a system that wasn't built for us to make it for us. And that's why obviously these conversations need to happen. And, change happens slowly, but I agree with you. It is changing. And it doesn't feel good when something is just positioned to you because of a need to place a product. And I just, it resonates so much because those are similarities, I guess, on both sides of the pond.
Yeah. And I think for me, I used to be very vocal about the gender disparities of women and men and the impact that has, so you touched on a few of those things there. The gender pay gap, we've got the issues of the motherhood penalty and time out of work. Mm-hmm. There's lots of factors that are more impacted for women than they are for men. But here's the thing for me, I have 2 boys, and having flied the flag for women and wealth for many, many years, what I actually think is slightly different now. What I actually think is more important to talk about is how do we nurture boys and men to hold wealthy women in our society, right? And what I mean by that is, and I get quite emotional even just thinking about it, because for me, it isn't a gender thing. And in some ways that could be quite damaging to the conversation of wealth, because if we make it a kind of him versus her conversation, it actually creates more separation.
Right.
And for me, I feel like whilst there are things that we need to be aware of for women, I think it's more about how do we collectively create a society where it is safe for anybody to be wealthy. And I mean wealthy in a sense of not how much money you have in your bank account, but in an all-encompassing way, right? And I feel like my job as a mum of boys is to teach them that it is safe for women to out-earn men if necessary, if they want to take time out to look after the children. If the woman is running a business and maybe he's employed, it's okay for her to earn more than him. But the problem is that for so many men, the generational patterns that sit around money for them is very different and very driven often by their sense of safety, security, and status, right? Whereas for women, it's not necessarily about status. We know that women are driven way more by ethical views, values than men, values-based investing than men are. Now, that doesn't mean that we're better than men. It just means that the way that we operate and think about money is different. Mm-hmm. So we actually have to have deeper conversations, I think, with Well, if men are driven by status and their sense of safety and security and identity, if they're no longer the main breadwinner, well, of course, that's going to create something inside of them that's going to feel that they are being threatened, that they're not good enough. And similarly for the other partner, right? If you're talking about a husband and a wife, for example, or a male and a female relationship. And so I just think that the more we can open up those conversations about it's okay to have a different relationship with money, it's okay to be influenced differently around money. But the important thing is, can we live together where we can all accept that it doesn't matter whether you are a woman or a man, what your sex is, that it is okay to create wealth.
I can't tell you how much I can relate to this. And I have a little boy and a little girl. And, I think that a lot of this work will be done simply by women now going out and blazing a trail. In my marriage, my husband, it has been traditionally a W-2 employee. He is now venturing into business ownership. But up until this point, I was the primary breadwinner and the entrepreneur. And I have to tell you, Catherine, as proud as he is of me, I recognize, even if he doesn't, there are things and comments that are made and even things that he says himself. And I know that it's a reflection of everybody has told me and society has told all of us that the man is the provider, and there must be something wrong if I'm not. And you are so accurate. And it's not just about, hey, women, this is how you have the conversations and plan to build wealth, but also doing the work as a society, as a people, to take that kind of disposition of I'm the man, I'm the breadwinner. Even, and I say this, I've said this before, and I want to provide a quick disclaimer. I know that this was never said with malice. I am very, very close to my mother-in-law and my mom, but my in-laws were down visiting and I had a work trip. And it had come right after a couple of late nights with different client events. And I remember my mother-in-law and my mom saying, "Oh, you're leaving Jason to put the kids to bed again tonight?" And I said to them, "You guys would never say this to a man." And they both, to their credit, said, "You know what? You're right. And we're sorry." And it wasn't meant, it's just what we've all been ingrained with for so long. And so I think that for all of you listening, it's not just about finding the resources and the tools to build the life. It is also about working to provide an example for the young boys. We talk all the time about the young girls that are watching us to have the healthy relationship, but also the young boys to make sure that they see a woman and a man working together to build wealth and financial security. And it doesn't matter where the money's coming from. It's just a healthy relationship with money, period.
Yes, 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 yes.
So what do you think? What do you see out there as the biggest hurdle in the work that you do with how, and we'll shift back obviously to women, but how are they, where do you think we have the biggest opportunity to jump over a hurdle to get ourselves on pace with where we want all women to be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think there's a lot of noise that talks about like women, owning their worth, right? There's this phrase, own your worth, charge your worth. If you're in business and you're listening to this, people are saying charge your worth. Well, for me, it's about disconnecting your sense of worthiness away from money. Because if we're constantly giving our evaluation on how much we are worth, whether that's our time, whether that's our experiences, whether it's our qualifications, then we're only going to be left feeling lack, right? And for me, separating our sense of identity and sense of worth away from money enables money to sit alongside our life, but it doesn't take control over our lives, right? Because the minute we start saying things like, I desire, or I want £1,000,000, right? Or £1,000,000 more pounds in my bank account, what we're kind of saying is, well, what I currently have is not enough. And what I currently have is not enough because I am not enough. And I think that's one of the biggest traps that so many of us fall into, especially women. And in money psychology, we call this fawning. Fawning is a psychological response when we, and I laugh when I say this because I do this a lot myself, like when we people please, when we overgive to other people, whether that's time or whether that's money. And I think it's a really big psychological shift to, like in use of your language, to get over that hurdle, is that the more we can actually give to our own needs, the better we will feel about ourselves. And it reminds me of a analogy actually that I heard from Sir Richard Branson. I work very closely with Virgin Unite, and I've had the real benefit and joy of going to visit Richard on Necker Island twice now.
Wow.
And including putting glitter on his face, which I'll tell you about another time. But the conversation I had with Richard about wealth was, I asked him this question, like, when you have so much wealth in the world, how do you decide what to do with it? Because I was really curious to know, well, there is a lot of responsibility around money. A lot of women in particular feel a huge responsibility of, well, when I have money, I've got to look after everybody else.
Do good with it, right?
Do good with it. Yeah, invest it in the right ways. I've got to take care of my parents, got to take care of my brothers and sisters and all the people. And we forget about ourselves. And what Richard said is, he said, well, you have to look after yourself first. That's the first circle to close, is close that circle around yourself. What are your needs? What are your financial needs? What are your emotional needs? What are your relationship needs? What are your spiritual needs? What are your needs? Mm-hmm. So even asking that question of yourself is potentially alien to you. And then once you have understood what is important for your needs, then it's about understanding the second circle, which is the needs of your friends and your family, followed by the third circle, which is the needs of your local community, and then followed by the needs of the planet or the world. And when he shared this analogy, it really struck me as quite significant, because I think that so many of us are in this game. We're in this pursuit of wealth, but we're in this pursuit of wealth for the benefit of other people. And it's like, well, what about our needs? We were often brought up with this perception that you have to look after everybody else first. You're the caregivers, the men are the breadwinners, you're the caregivers. And so we behave in a way that it leaves a fraction of energy left for ourselves at the end of the day, because the belief that sits behind that is, well, I have to look after everybody else's needs first.
Yes. I mean, that is so powerful, because I cannot tell you how many conversations, and I know that you would probably be able to say the same thing, sitting down with someone and saying, what is the end goal so that I can help you get there? And I don't think I've ever heard somebody say the end goal is first and foremost something to meet their need. It's always about their parents, their charities, their children. Wow, that's remarkable.
And at the end of the day, for most of us, we want to live a really enriched life. And an enriched life isn't necessarily about making the most money. It's about understanding, what does that look like for you as an individual? And I think that when you have that in mind, and then you start to create your own wealth map, then it suddenly makes a lot more sense. And it allows you to be able to work, whether it's alongside a financial professional or not, but it's working alongside living the most enriched life so that you can die with £1 in your account, right? There's a great analogy that talks about how, we often are in this pursuit of just save, 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 invest, invest, invest. But actually, we really want to enjoy that balance between enjoying the here and now and also planning for the future. And some people are very natural at looking ahead and planning ahead and saving and investing. And for other people, they're very much in the here and the now. So it is about getting that careful balance between those two pieces.
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of working with people that are now on the opposite side of their, most important working years. And even I can speak from the perspective of my parents, where now it's at the point where we are not accumulating, but decumulating. And that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to give themselves the permission. You've done the hard work. Bravo. Yeah. You're here. You're 70. Enjoy it. What did you do it all for? It's not to hoard it and leave it to someone else. It's truly to enjoy the fruits of your labor and live out the best version of your life.
Well, what's really interesting is that we did some research recently on the generational money DNAs, right? And if you take either the baby boomers or what we call like the silent generation, so anyone who was born like around sort of mid-20s to 1945, like the silent generation, your grandparents would kind of sit in this kind of space, right? People that are in that age demographic now, is that if you think about their money experiences, they had the Great Depression. So what was the Great Depression is childhood trauma with scarcity attached to it, right?
World War.
You've got World War II, which is rationing. There's lack of resources, scarcity of resources, all about community cooperation. You've then got the post-war. So you've got this economic boom that happened after the war, which left people feeling this real dramatic shift from scarcity to abundance, like this resourced society again. And so their biggest money fears is running out of money, being a burden to their children, economic collapse, being taken advantage of by financial scams, and outliving their savings. Those are the biggest money fears for that generation. Now think about the next generation beyond that. Think about the baby boomer generation that followed your parents, for example. Well, what did they experience? Well, they experienced post-war prosperity, lots of optimism, lots of growth around money. They experienced things like the civil rights movement, which is all about challenging authorities and institutions. They experienced the rise of consumer culture, credit cards, mortgages, inflation. The 1960s was when women could first open their own bank account in the UK, right? The 1980s was their first mortgage. So that generation, their biggest money fears were not having enough for a comfortable retirement, healthcare costs significantly bankrupting them, being forced to work past their retirement age, and becoming dependent on their children. Right? And now, if you just take those two generational money DNA blueprints, one from the silent generation of during the war, and then one of this kind of baby boomer generation, put those two together, and then you are born, right? Whether you are in the Gen X age demographic or the millennial, I just tip into the millennial,
same here,
just about, or Gen Z, all of those further generations, we know through research that our relationship with money goes back 3 generations.
Wow.
So our beliefs about money don't just come from our own experiences. They're coming from
our grandparents.
3 past generations. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that this subject is fascinating because when you can really understand some of the influences on your relationship with money, like you just gave in that example of your mum and your grandmother saying this to you, as you know, like they're not trying to cause harm. It's just that that's what they grew up
Mm-hmm.
with. Those were the belief systems that they grew up and experienced. And I think it is important to really take some time to consider your generational money blueprint. How does that influence the decisions that you are making today in a positive way? And how does it influence the decisions that you're making in a way that maybe you want to hand some of them back with love and gratitude, but hand some of them back because they're not operating in that generational society anymore. We've shifted into a society where we are questioning authorities. We can see that with the rise of cryptocurrency and digital assets. We're questioning the banks. We are questioning authorities. We are wanting to invest with a very value-based lens, thinking about ethics and sustainability and all of those, giving back to the planet, all of those things. And we're quite optimistic really now about money, much more than we ever used to be, because it's so much easier to make money now than it was 50 years
Yeah,
ago.
I think the optimism of our parents' generation, they were the ones I feel like that really, went to work for themselves, especially through the 60s and 70s. There were more women going out and working. And so then when we come along, now we feel like more in control of our ability to make money. And you're right. I think there's a lot more optimism. So tell me where somebody that's listening, you had this aha moment, and who knows if that flyer hadn't been at the tea shop, where you would have ended up. We never know. But for somebody that's listening and thinking, okay, I've got a good relationship with money as far as I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do with it, but maybe my money mindset is off. Where does somebody start to ask those questions to dive into this journey?
Yeah, great question. So we have a framework that we teach, and we call it the money narrative clearing method. And in this framework, the very first step is awareness. The second step is benefits, and the third step is challenges. So I'm just going to invite a couple of questions around these first three steps. And there's a bunch of resources which I'm sure we can link to
absolutely.
that go deeper into this. But the awareness stage is really understanding, what is my relationship to money? If you were to think about money, how would you describe it? If it was a friend or a business partner, how would you describe that relationship? And for many of us, that relationship can feel contracted, it can feel expansive, it can feel like we are holding ourselves back, it can feel like we're not giving ourselves permission to create more wealth because we're afraid of how people might judge us for that, what other people might say about that. We may have some fear around running out of money and there not being enough. We might have a fear, well, I'm going to have to work my butt off to earn money because, money doesn't grow on trees. We might repel money because we think, well, rich people are greedy and I don't want to be associated with those kind of feelings. So the first thing is just to really ask yourself that question, like, if you were to describe that relationship with money, how would you describe that? And then once you start to get some curiosity to how has that played out with how you behave with money, then you can just imagine taking a coin, and on one side is the head and one side is the tail. And on the head side, you kind of want to ask yourself, well, how has this belief supported me? How has this belief that rich people are greedy, or that money doesn't grow on trees, or that I don't deserve to have this money when other people are suffering in the world, like, how has that really supported me? Now, the reason we ask the supportive question first is because your brain will automatically try and give you all the reasons why it's sabotaging you or challenging you, right? That's the brain's job, is to keep you safe. So by looking at this lens through the lens of, well, how has it supported me? It gets you thinking about things like secondary gains. And secondary gains is very often a survival pattern that's going on underneath, where your nervous system is really trying not to be bad with money, but you can't seem to get out of the habits, And secondary gains are often created where it's safer for you to be in those sabotaging behaviors or in that sabotaging mindset than it is to change, right? And so that's why asking that question in that order does unlock a lot of very interesting beliefs, thoughts, emotions as well. You know, a lot of emotions around money can come up with that question, particularly around guilt or shame around money. And it's about holding love for yourself in those conversations and compassion. And then we kind of flip that coin onto the other side and think about, well, how has it sabotaged me? What has it stopped me from allowing myself to receive? You know, is it stopping me from allowing myself to even go and reach out to you for financial advice? Or is it stopping you from being able to just talk to somebody about where they're at with their money situation? Is it stopping them from diving into some more of the adult conversations of investing, for example, versus just managing the household purse? And so that would be where I would start, is to really think about creating some awareness around your relationship to money, and then think about the benefits, how it's supported you, and then think about the challenges. How has it sabotaged you, or how is it stopping you from living your most enriched life? And I think if you go through those just 3 steps, you will unearth a whole load of belief systems, thoughts and emotions that then you can start to very gently and curiously unpick and unravel.
I was going to say, then that's when the really hard work begins, truly, to rewire how your brain works and unpacking a lot of things that don't serve you and recognizing the things that do serve you. And I know we're going to link quite a bit in the show notes, but you know, as we wrap up, I think one of the most important takeaways for me on this is it doesn't matter if you consider yourself good or bad with money. The work that needs to be evaluated is truly where that money story comes from and figuring out what you're taking with you and what you're leaving behind, because there's always ways to improve. And I would encourage everybody listening, you have a very successful podcast. It's not about the money. So I would encourage everyone to tune in. The work and the conversations that Catherine is having are life-changing. And if somebody is listening and thinks, I would love to learn more or work with you on some of the materials that you've created, where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. My podcast is a great place to start. As you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously a podcast listener. But reach out to me on my socials. Instagram is my favorite platform. So Catherine Morgan Money is my Instagram handle. Or just come and visit me over on my website. We've got a bunch of resources on there, including a money quiz, which is always a really nice, easy kind of place to start, which is catherinemorgan.com/quiz. And in that quiz, we really help you to identify what are some of the common, most natural ways that show up for you around money, and how can you start to lean into those better without shaming yourself. And then how can you start to maybe harness some of the other narratives around money so that you can manage, plan, and create more wealth for yourself.
I love that and encourage all of you to follow the amazing work that Catherine is doing. And I know I said this already many times, but it has been an absolute pleasure. I so enjoy the time that we get to spend together and look forward to watch the way that you are helping women and men change their relationship and story with money. And thank you so much for having the conversation with me today. And for all of you listening, I appreciate so much that you come back week after week and are doing the hard work, having the conversations. As always, share, like, subscribe, and keep the conversations going. Until next time, let's change the way women think and feel about money together.